Welcome to the fourth episode of the ImprovED podcast. My name is Justin Coffey, and you can find me on Twitter at JustinBCoffey. And here at the ImprovED podcast, what we're all about is pushing the evolution of education by talking to some rock star teachers. So I've got a couple of rock star teachers. I want to pass it over to Jennifer. Jennifer, why don't you tell the world who you are?
I am Jennifer Farr. I teach fifth grade in Junction City, Kansas at Lincoln Elementary. And you can find me on Twitter at Jennifer M. Farr.
Excellent. And we have a rock star guest today. And so, Jennifer, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our guest.
All right. Well, our guest this week is Michael Soskil. Mike is a dynamic speaker and professional learning facilitator, author, and one of the most highly recognized teachers in the world. I will emphasize the world because he's definitely a global educator. The book he co-authored is Teaching in the Fourth Industrial Revolution and has been called an authoritative guide to teaching practice over the next 3 decades. He has been endorsed by world leaders in government, education, and business, and is the 2017-18 Pennsylvania Teacher of the Year. He was also named one of the top 10 teachers in the world by the Global Teacher Prize in 2016. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, thanks for having me.
That is quite the resume there.
That's huge.
That's incredible. Yeah. Feel honored to have you on, Mike. And I guess I just want to start off by I'm curious what brought you into education and how did you get to where you're at?
Yeah, so I know a lot of really highly recognized teachers have this great story about the teacher who changed their life and inspired them, or, they were playing with dolls and teaching their dolls when they were a kid. My story is like none of those. I got into teaching for all of the wrong reasons. It's a horrible, so I loved coaching youth soccer. And since I was about 14 or 15 years old, I was coaching younger kids. I loved being a soccer coach. And when it came time at the end of high school to choose a college major, I really looked for the easy way out, and I said, what is a job that will allow me to keep coaching, right? And elementary teacher sounded great. So I went to school to be an elementary teacher, and I started the girls soccer program here at the high school in northeastern Pennsylvania where we are. And I really thought that for my career, that's what I was going to focus on. I was going to be a coach who also taught. But something happened. I was really good at being a mediocre teacher for the first 10 years of my career. If you came into my classroom, my kids would be in rows. I had great classroom management, but no classroom empowerment. My kids were on task. It probably looked great to an administrator coming in, but I wasn't giving those kids anything special. And around 2007, I stumbled into a conference session being given by Patty Duncan at Pennsylvania's Ed Tech Conference. And I really just wanted to meet Patty because we had emailed back and forth before, and I didn't really care what the session was about. But it happened to be on building your professional learning network. And once I started using social media to connect with other teachers, I realized what I wasn't giving my own students. And I loved those kids, and I knew that they deserved more. And so I made a commitment at that time that I was going to start growing as an educator and start doing better for them. And everything afterwards kind of sprung out of that.
So how do you connect with educators on social network?
Yeah, so it started after that first session. It was there was a social network called Plurk, which I don't use anymore. And there's about 500 teachers that were on Plurk. Apparently, Twitter had failed during a big conference, and people had looked for something else that they could migrate over to, and they found Plurk, and so they started using that. So there was this group of 500 teachers, and then there were knitters. There was a big knitting community on Plurk, and then there were Koreans who speaking in Korean, which I couldn't understand. So for those 3 groups, it was great. But in those 500 teachers, I met some absolutely incredible people who shaped my thinking of what it meant to be a teacher. I know you had Diane Smokorowski on here before. She and I started our friendship. We've been close ever since we met on Plurk over a decade ago. In Kansas, you've got some amazing teachers out there in Kansas. Honeycutt, right? I mean, Ginger Lumen. All of my relationship with all of them started on Plurk at that time. And then over time, things shifted over. And now most of my networking is done on Twitter or Facebook, in Facebook groups, using hashtags on Twitter.
That's super interesting. It's kind of cool how the education circles are are relatively small. You know, some of those names that you're throwing out there, I'm like, oh yeah, like those are the same people who kind of transformed my teaching game. And so it's cool to be worlds apart and know some of the same people through social media.
Yeah, you know, if you're like an NFL fan and you follow a team, you know, you often talk about like the coaching tree where you've got all of these great coaches who were inspired by this one coach who was inspired by, you know, and I think for those of us in these circles in education, we can usually trace back our roots to a couple of people who were really innovative and thought leaders in this space, who shaped the way we thought and laid the groundwork for us to become leaders in our own way and to shape the minds of other people who come after us.
So would you say it's a fair statement to say that social media has really made you who the teacher you are? Would that be a fair statement to say?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I would say social media combined with shifting my mindset and being willing to take risks and to change.
So how do you suggest teachers start getting on social media and connecting that way?
Yeah, so I just gave a session for teachers in Scranton yesterday. And one of the things I showed them was if you're not on Twitter, you probably should be. Not because there are pictures, you know, I hate to say this because I know there's a lot of teachers that really love Pinterest and teachers pay teachers. But too many young teachers today feel like if they are using pretty bulletin boards from Pinterest, that is good teaching, right? Mm-hmm. And it's crap. And I mean crap literally, like that's the acronym. Curriculum randomly accumulated on Pinterest. Right? So they are, you know,
I'm going to start using that. I love that.
There you go. Or teachers pay teachers, right? You know, same thing. So they're down, if they download the right worksheets and put up the right bulletin board, that makes them a great teacher. What Twitter allows for is conversation. It allows for interaction. And unless I'm willing to put out the things that I do every day and allow other people to comment on them and give me both positive and negative feedback, I don't grow. Unless I'm willing to read the great things that other people are doing and see how I can incorporate them into my classroom so that I can do those things for my kids, I'm not growing. And so Twitter is a great place because of the way that it's curated with hashtags for you to find exactly things that fit your classroom that you can bring in. And then to ask questions of those people and have good conversations on there.
Excellent. One of the things I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about is the book that you co-authored, because I've been seeing, speaking of Twitter, I've been seeing that book all over Twitter. And so if you could just talk to our viewers about that process and what your book is about and how it's changing the world of education.
Sure. So, Teaching in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, now available on Amazon. So it's been an incredible journey this past year. Something that we never expected to happen. It was serendipity. It was just one of those things that happens. About a year and a half ago, I was in the airport in San Francisco on my way to fly to DC for a conference. And I got a call on my cell phone from Armand Doucette, who is a Global Teacher Prize finalist in Canada. And he said, Mike, I just found out that the theme of this year's Global Education and Skills Forum, and that is the place where the Global Teacher Prize finalist is, or finalists are recognized, where the winner is announced every year. It happens in Dubai. Heads of state, education ministers from around the world come to talk education policy with some of the best teachers in the world. So it's this incredible interaction going on there. And he said, I just found out the theme is education for 2030 and beyond. What do you think about us getting together a group of teachers to write about what the future of education is going to be? He said, there's so many people talking about that who aren't practitioners, who don't know what it's like in a classroom. What if we got 5 or 6 people together who really knew what they were doing, who had credibility in this area to talk about what the future of education needs to be in this technological, exploding technological landscape that we have? And so our first intention was not even to publish a book. We were just going to publish like kind of an online book or a series of essays that we could get in the hands of those influential policy people. That was our first thought. And we all got together, 5 of the 6 authors got together in Toronto over a weekend last September. And we locked ourselves for 2 12-hour days up in a office space in Toronto that we rented. We don't even know who it belonged to, but it was what we could get. And we just banged out ideas for 2 long 12-hour days. And at the end, we said, we've got something here. This is better than just a series of essays. We think we should publish this. And Routledge was gracious enough to accept us. And we said, we want this out by the Global Education and Skills Forum. And they said, well, it's now September, I think it was September 25th or September 28th at the time. They said, in order for us to do that, we need the manuscript in our hands edited by November 6th. So we said, wow, all right. So
gosh.
we're going to write a book. We're going to write a book in a month. And that's basically what we did. We just, each of us took a chapter or two and that we were experts in and dug in. And, we were constantly sending emails back and forth, staying up, having no sleep. And within a couple of weeks, we got the book written and edited and shipped off to Routledge. And it is done so well that it is now being translated into Vietnamese for sure.
Wow.
I believe there are contract negotiations for Spanish. I don't think I can make an announcement on that yet. But there are also at least two other.
About big announcements. Come on.
Yeah. I don't think I'm allowed to make that announcement yet, but I know that is under consideration, and also two other languages. So it's selling really well around the world. One thing that your listeners should know, or your viewers should know, is that the six of us as authors decided that we were not going to take any money from royalties from the book. All of the money from book sales is going to a nonprofit organization that helps teachers that are doing projects that fit the theme of the book, helps them get into those spaces and supports them in doing those projects. So we really wrote it just to get the message out there. And the central theme of the book, if we could boil it down to one thing, is that as technology is exploding, we need to find the intersection between technological relevance for our schools and keeping education rooted in humanity and compassion and empathy and relationships and all of the things that we know as teachers. We need to find the sweet spot where the two of those things intersect.
That is an amazing topic because honestly, as sometimes I'm talking with teachers about technology and how we can use technology in the classroom, sometimes the conversation shifts to, oh my gosh, I don't think we're going to need teachers pretty soon. Kids are just going to be behind computers. And I'm just like, whoa, no. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I think teachers are going to be more important as technology advances because just like you said, yes, we can use machines to do things that machines are really great at, but machines will never be able to replace that humanity thing that you're talking about, that human spirit, the human human aspect of who we are.
One of the things that we know is that every new technology that's developed creates ethical choices that we have to make as a society, and it creates inequity if we aren't aware of it and trying to counter it. Right. So people who have access to new technologies are going to have more opportunity to make money, to have access to newer technologies, and so on and so forth. Right. And so if you look at just that question of will machines replace teachers? I think one of our biggest fears as we were writing is that there is a portion of the population, especially in that technology space, that believes that AI will be so powerful that they can do our job. And what will end up happening is that in places where they can't get excellent teachers because they're not paying them enough money because the society can't afford it, for whatever reason, the fear is that they in those areas, they will give as a replacement some kind of technological tool that allows kids to, maybe it will be customized to their content, right? If they answer the right question, they'll get another question that is built on what their skills are. But there's no relationship there. And neuroscience tells us again and again that if you want someone to remember information, they have to have an emotional connection with it. That's why, you can pass a test, but it goes out of your short-term memory in 2 or 3 weeks if you don't have some kind of emotional connection with that content. And that's what we do so well as teachers, is we build those relationships and allow kids to feel emotional about what's going on in school. No machine will ever be able to do that. And more importantly, no machine will ever be able to love students the way that we love students. It's the most important thing that we do in schools. And so, I think one of our concerns as we were writing is what happens if in those areas, let's face it, people who have money are always going to pay for great teachers, right? They're never going to settle for a machine teaching their kids. But the fear is that people that don't have money, or societies that don't have money, will be forced to do this for their kids, and it will drive equity gaps further and further.
Wow, that's an important conversation. And as Kansas is looking at redesign and what's the future of education look like, I think that your book is an important resource for us to look at and think about, the future of what education will look like. So I appreciate that. Another thing that you were talking about with kind of social media and is being willing to share with other people. And before this podcast started, I got a chance to kind of talk to you about how you share every day on Facebook, like your plans for the day, like what's happening for the day, and how that's like super inspirational for me to read every day. And I also know that you too are starting a podcast. And so can you talk to me a little bit about the importance of sharing what's happening in your classroom and in your schools?
Sure. So I worked with some pre-service teachers at Keystone College 2 nights ago. They were mostly sophomores and juniors, so they haven't started their student teaching yet. And they wanted me to come and talk to them about what's the role of social media in education as a teacher. And I asked them a question. I said, in your understanding, what does it mean to be a professional teacher? What does it mean to be a professional? And we had this great conversation. And I said, okay, take the teacher part out of it. Think about a doctor or a lawyer. What does it mean for them to be professional? And I said, if you were a heart surgeon and you developed a new technique for heart surgery that saved lives, what would you do with that? And they said, well, you would have to publish it in a journal, right? That's just what you do. I said, of course, right? It is your ethical and moral obligation to publish that so that other doctors can use it and save lives. I said, well, all of us know that teachers save lives every day. It's what we do, right? Anyone who has been to school knows that. And yet so many teachers do these amazing things for kids behind closed doors and nobody knows about them. It is unprofessional. It is malpractice to not be sharing the great things that happen in your classroom with other people so that they can replicate them. Because they may be able to do great things for kids with that same idea, or adapt it in their situation, or even better, make it better than yours was and then give it back to you so that you can do better things for kids, right? That's what it means to be a professional. And yet we don't do that for a variety of reasons. One of them being we're afraid of what's going to happen in the faculty room, right? So we mentioned Kevin Honeycutt before, and he has that great line that, most innovation in schools dies of domestic violence, right? We eat our own. We're horrible to each other, right? But if we are going to demand from society that they're going to treat us as professionals, we have to act like professionals. And part of that means sharing. And social media is a great place to do that and to have those conversations. The other piece that I shared with them up there was, cyberbullying is obviously a big problem. We've talked about that in education a lot. But I can't tell you how many teachers I know on Facebook that have been doing things that we would consider cyberbullying if kids were doing them, but they're doing them and they think because they're doing it to a public figure that it doesn't matter, right? Whether it's political or whatever, and my point to those kids who are becoming teachers was, your students are going to see what adults are doing online. And if this is what you're doing, even though it's not to someone that you know personally, if this is what you're doing online, they're going to think that's how social media should be used. And you can bet your rear end that we are going to see an increase in cyberbullying and kids being awful to each other online, because that's what the adults in their life are modeling. We have got to do a better job. We have got to, if it is a personal attack, we would never take a picture of someone we know personally and post the worst picture that we can find with a horrible saying on it and stick it up on the internet. But that's what adults are doing all the time. So we've got to stop that.
I also like the fact that you share what you're doing every day, because I feel like it gives people an insight to what really goes on in classrooms. I view it, and I don't know if this was your intent, but a way to advocate for the profession of, look what I'm doing every day. Like, I am working my hardest every day, and this is what we're doing, as in the important standards I'm meeting and how I'm making them better humans.
Well, I wish that it was that altruistic, but really, in reality,
in my mind, it was.
That's good. Let's go with that. But it was first, it was at least a little bit selfish because I mentioned how social media kind of changed my trajectory. And what I started doing was throwing things. And originally, this started on Plurk. I've been doing this, for decades since I was on Plurk. I would throw things out there with the hope that someone would tell me to do it better, right? Like someone would give me some feedback and say, "Oh, if you're doing that, you can do this also." And a great example of that this morning is, I posted this morning that my kids are going to start learning about solar system and Earth, Sun.
Oh, I saw that.
Right. And then a Pennsylvania Teacher of the Year finalist from last year saw my post and she said, she's a high school Spanish teacher. And she said, "My kids are learning the names of the planets in Spanish. Do you think there's some way that we could collaborate?" Right. So if I didn't put that out there, that collaboration never would have happened. And now we're setting up a Skype call and maybe some lessons where her kids are going to teach my 4th and 5th graders, from a different part of the state, how to say the different names of the planets. And the hope is, right, that's not part of my direct science curriculum, but I'm hoping that might make a little more of that emotional connection that allows them to hold on to it long term, rather than them just being able to pass the test on Friday and then lose it.
Love it. One of the things, I'm lucky enough to have got to meet you in person a couple of times, and you came out to Kansas one time, and I got to sit in one of your breakouts, and one of the things that hit me home the most was when you started talking about empathy and the importance of empathy for our students, and what are we doing as teachers to develop and cultivate that empathy in our students. So can you talk a little bit about your feelings on empathy?
Yeah. So during workshops, I often use this example. Johnson & Johnson did a study a couple years ago where they looked at the most successful people in business. And granted, business is not, microcosm of society. It's a small little portion. But they looked at the most successful people in the business world, and they identified all of the character traits that they had. Were they trustworthy? Did they have grit and determination? Whatever, right? And they found the character trait that most closely correlated with success. And to most people's shock, it happened to be emotional intelligence and empathy, right? The ability to build relationships, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand them. That was the most important factor in people being successful. And so I wonder if that is such a key to success, right? Why do we not spend time talking about it in schools? For 22 years I've been teaching, I've never been in a faculty meeting where empathy was the focus, right? And as I was working with those teachers in Scranton yesterday, I said, in all of the time that you've been teaching, how many faculty have you ever had that were focused on empathy? And they said, this one right here, this is the first one, right? That's what they told me to figure. So yeah, but that is really, when we talk about the need to find that intersection between humanity and technology, empathy is that humanity piece. Because as technology, the most noble use of technology in schools is not to get kids to understand content. It's to empower them to use that content to overcome problems they see in society that are being caused by the very technologies that we have access to. Right? Because these technologies are creating problems. I listen to podcasts all the time, and the TED Radio Hour is one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. And there was one about a month ago, maybe a month or two ago, that was talking about how we're going to be able to insert genes into fetuses to give them the ability to overcome certain genetic diseases or mm-hmm. genetic predispositions. Right? And so where do we stop? Where's the ethical line? If we can change a kid's, hair color, if we can make them stronger, if we can, at what point do we lose our humanity, right? And the only way that we're going to prepare kids to navigate those ethical choices they're going to have to make as adults is to start allowing them to use empathy in the classroom to make the world a better place for other kids or for other people that they come in contact with. And that has to come from them. If we, one of the things I'm passionate about is exposing kids to the world, right? Making sure that you can't change the world if you don't know enough about it, right? So giving kids these experiences through video conferencing where they meet others that are different than them, and then identifying where there are equity gaps and creating partnerships with those kids that they become friends with to try and find two-way partnerships where both kids are trying to give each other something that they need.
So how do you build empathy in your science classroom? What are some things you do?
Yeah, so I've been teaching science for 4 years now. I was a fifth grade teacher for a while, and then I was a curriculum coach. And my first year teaching science, I was totally going through the imposter syndrome, right? We all know that. Anyone that's ever been recognized for doing a good job in their field goes through that. I had just been named a top 50 finalist for the Global Teacher Prize for the work that I was doing as a curriculum coach and in my fifth grade classroom. And I was now teaching science where I had no idea what I was doing. Right? So I felt totally inept and unworthy, and all of those things that come with imposter syndrome. And I met with my STEM director, and he said, try and get more engineering into your class. And I knew the design process because I had used it in other subject areas before. And I knew that in science curriculum, we had to look at forces in motion and how forces are distributed and those kinds of things. And we happened to have a Skype call with a group of kids in Kenya. And the school director took us around his small rural village, and he showed us this bridge that was dilapidated and falling apart, and there was this dangerous creek underneath. And he said to my students, he said, kids who are in kindergarten and first and second grade are not allowed to go to school until they're older because their parents from the other side of the village will not let them cross this bridge. It's too dangerous. And during the rainy season, the water comes up so high that even the high school kids have to take a month off school because they can't cross the bridge. And my students were horrified. And so they said, Mr. Soskil, we need to do something about that. And for me, this was the perfect opportunity to allow them to use that design process I had to get into my classes to work on this problem. So we got the dimensions of the banks and all that from the school director. And I had my kids first build models out of paper and then test them with pennies to make them fail. and then redesign them to make them stronger. And then they made them out of cardboards, and we put rocks on top to make them fail. And they came up with a design they really liked, and we shipped it over to a bridge designer in Kimilili, who told us it would cost about $3,500 US in order to build the bridge, which is way more than we can raise in this rural spot that we have here. But the kids were determined. So they started selling cupcakes at lunch, and we had movie night. They couldn't charge admission for the movie, but they could sell bags of popcorn. Over the course of the year, they raised about $1,200. But around January of that year, a couple of kids had foresight that they wouldn't hit their goal, and they asked me for help designing a website where they could share what they were doing and ask for outside help. And through that website, they actually brought in another $2,500. And so I was able to go in June and show them pictures of the bridge being built, and then finally pictures of kids standing on that bridge that they designed, where now every kid in Muguyuni, Kenya can go to school because they have a bridge that crosses their creek. So for my students, that was their chance to understand how much they mattered and how much they made a difference. But there was something really key about that project that I try and incorporate into all service projects like that. And that is, I told my students, what are you going to ask for in return? Because unless they see value in the people that they're trying to help, they can't build that true empathy. And we were just starting a school garden outside my classroom, right outside my window that's right here. And I didn't know anything about gardening at the time. But the school that we were working with in just outside of Kimilili had this beautiful school garden. And so they were sending us videos, teaching us planting techniques and telling us when you know the plants are ready and when you should transplant them. And so that was their contribution back to us. And so the kids very much saw each other as equals through that process. And that's really how they found their shared humanity and how they found their empathy.
How'd you guys connect with that classroom? How do you find those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love
this Kansas girl has no idea.
Yeah, so Twitter is a great place to start. Using certain hashtags like games like Mystery Skype, hashtag Mystery Skype will allow you to find just a 20-question game where you could ask yes or no questions to try and guess the other's location. Skype in the Classroom is a great resource, education, Microsoft.com, where you can find teachers all over the world that are willing to connect with you. But my new favorite tool for teachers that are just starting out and have never done something like this before is Empatico. Empatico, yes. So you go on the website. It takes about 3 minutes to register. You choose one of 9 lessons that is matched to your curriculum. So one of them is like collecting data on your weather. Another one is looking at the energy usage in your community. But you can adapt them to just about anything you're teaching. And other teachers from around the world are doing the same thing. And then you put in the time that you're available. And the website will automatically match you with another class that wants to do the same activity and is available at the same time that is more than 300 miles away. So you don't have to worry about finding your match. You don't have to worry about what am I going to do when we call each other? It's all built right into that site, and you don't have to download anything. It's right there in the website where you connect. And so if you're just starting out and you've never done anything like this before, that is the easiest way to get started.
That's awesome.
I love that website.
Yeah, and I think then that's where you can start building a relationship and start creating something bigger and new from that. So yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. That's a great tip for our teachers. The other thing, you're talking about resources and all of these things, and you help create a really great resource that I love. And this is, can you talk about, I want to get it right, 5 clues?
Yeah, 5 clue challenge. The 5 clue challenge.
5 clue challenge. That's it. Yeah.
So one of the problems that we found early on in connecting globally is that sometimes kids on the other side of the world weren't in school at the same time that we were. So if we were doing Mystery Skype with kids in Australia or Taiwan or Japan, we couldn't find a time that worked for both of us to be in school. And so we would send video messages back and forth. And one of the things that came out of that is we would send 5 clues so they could guess our location, and they'd do the same for us. And I didn't save any of those videos because I didn't think about it, and I should have, because they would have been amazing learning tools, right? But when I became recognized as a Global Teacher Prize finalist and I started doing more traveling, I wanted to bring those experiences back to my own students. Mm-hmm. And so what I started doing is creating my own 5 clue challenge videos based on whatever cool place I was, whether it was a mystery location or a mystery animal that I was next to. If I was in the desert, and I was near a camel, how cool would it be to have my kids guess the camel? Or if I was next to a cool statue, like mystery person, see if you can guess, who the person is I'm near. And I started recording those videos and putting them on a website so that my kids could view them when I got back. Hey, guess where I was, right? Let's see if we can figure it out. And I would use them to teach research skills. So, why don't you type an entire question into Google? Why do you use keywords? When do you use Google Maps? And when is Google search engine better? How do you know if a site's reliable? If there's pop-up ads, you shouldn't use that site. They're trying to sell you something, right? So it was my way to teach them research while taking them along with me a little bit. And over time, I started putting those videos up there, and other teachers said, hey, we want our kids to create these also. And so I put a submission form. And now there are, it's probably like 130 to 150 different videos from all over the world. About half of them are me, half of them are other kids and other teachers from around the world that have sent them to me. And they're all categorized right there on the website, by mystery location, mystery person. So the website is the number 5 clue challenge, 5cluechallenge.weebly.com, Weebly, W-E-E-L-Y. 5cluechallenge.weebly.com, and all of those are available. They're just YouTube videos that you can go and play with your kids and take them all around the world to, so if, this is a great backup. If you've got a mystery Skype planned or a Empatico call and it falls apart for some reason, this is your great backup. Okay, let's play 5 Clue Challenge instead,
Yeah. And I love, one, it's a great thing to do with your students, to watch these videos and try and figure them out. And 2, it's a great thing to create with your students and submit so that others can find your location or animal, your state animal maybe, or something like that. So
yeah, and you can adapt it to any part of your curriculum. I had some kids that were done with a math test that I was working with yesterday, and they're like, hey, can we try creating a mystery number video? I was like, sure, go for it.
Awesome.
So, yeah, so they've got a couple of them, and they use the green screen that's here in my, in my science lab. And it was like, this number is divisible by 3. It has 2 digits. It's, whatever, their clues. And so they adapted it to their math lessons. So yeah, you can tie it into anything you're doing. And if you send those videos to me through the submission form, I'll put them up there so that other kids can use them.
Super cool.
Awesome. I love that.
So another thing is, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. I totally forgot what I was about to say.
So while he's thinking of it, I'm just going to talk. Yeah. As we're on our path to become, obviously education is becoming much more global because of social media, because of just what we need to do is what's best practices. How do we get there as teachers? How do I start opening my classroom? Empatico, social media? What's my first baby step in becoming more global in my classroom?
Yeah, so if you go to my website, michaelsoskil.com, you can see some of the different slide decks that I've used, and I have a slide that I use for this exact question, and I always share it because I know doing things like the bridge project we did, that is overwhelming for teachers who have never even had like a video conference call with another class before, right? How do I get to there? So the first step is really 5 Clue Challenge and Empatico. Do the things that are really easy for you. You can incorporate those in super easy. 5 Clue Challenge, you don't even need another class. Empatico gives you a taste of connecting where you don't have to do that much work, and the curriculum is built in. And then once you get comfortable with that, the next step after that would be things like Mystery Skype, where you connect with another class and your kids don't know their location and their kids don't know yours, and you ask yes or no questions to see who can guess the location first. Or here in my science lab, we play Mystery Animal. So it's our way of learning animal classification. Does your animal have a backbone? Is it a mammal? Does it have hooves? Whatever. Or if you're, you can play mystery number in a math class. If you're a high school chemistry class, you play mystery element. If you're a kindergarten class, your kids don't have map skills, so you use letters of the alphabet. Does your state start with an A? Does it start with a consonant? Whatever. Then once you get comfortable with that, you start taking your kids on virtual field trips. And there's a couple of great sites that I love for this. Skype in the Classroom that I mentioned before, where you can connect with scientists or authors or museums all over the world that will take your kids on tours and use their educational outreach aspect of their mission to teach your kids about what they're passionate about. So you get your kids to travel the world and see some different things. And during those calls, you ask them to look for the connection between what they're learning in their classroom and what's going on with people solving problems in the real world. And eventually you start empowering your kids to say, okay, do you see something on this call that you can make a difference? Is there something that we're learning that connects with that problem where we can get involved in trying to make it better? And over time, if you build that class culture, those things will start happening organically. And then you let your kids run with them. None of the major projects that we're known for, whether it's the Project Link, the water filter project, or the distance teaching project, where my kids were teaching kids in the near Kibera slum using math manipulatives and video, and they were teaching us Swahili. Or last year we designed aquaponics units out of recycled materials to give blueprints to college in Malawi, because Malawi is going through a drought due to climate change right now. So we're trying to help them solve that problem because aquaponics units use 90% less water. All of those projects came because kids said, there's a problem here. We need to do something about that. It was never me saying to them, let's do this. It was always the kids coming to me and saying, we can make a difference here. Let's do something about this.
That's awesome. I remembered my question. So I think that our stories are a little bit similar in the fact that I got into teaching mainly because I thought coaching was a great thing to do, and I love coaching. But if you could go back and like knowing what you know now, or going through these experiences that you've gone through, like give advice to yourself as like a first year teacher. Is there anything you'd want to tell yourself as a first year teacher, first year coach with the teaching on the side, right? Like that's how I started out. So
yeah, I don't know that I would do anything differently because it got me here, and that's your typical answer. But I also look back at those first 10 years of teaching when I was coaching soccer, and that was my primary focus. And I know that some of the relationships that I built with the girls that I coached were really impactful for them and really shaped me also. I was just down in South Carolina doing a teacher training a month ago, and I ran into one of my soccer players was living down there, and I went to the Waffle House for the first time. It was my first Waffle House experience. And we got to catch up, and it made me realize like how special those relationships were then. Teaching 4th and 5th graders, you don't always know the impact that you have when those kids graduate because you have such a distance in between. But I knew those girls when they graduated, like they were close enough to their real experience in life where we were able to have those conversations about how impactful playing soccer was in our program. And so I think that was really important. Like there was an important role that I played during that time, and I don't know that was the things happen for a reason, and that wasn't the right time for me to be focused on these kinds of things that I'm doing in my classroom. But when that shift happened, it was necessary, right? It made me a better teacher. And I think the one piece of advice that I would go back and give myself is, as that shift was taking place, I was so excited about the things that I was learning that I just wanted to share them with everyone around me. Mm-hmm. And I probably didn't do that in the healthiest way, right? Like, I mean, I was bubbling with enthusiasm and like wanting to just beat people over the head because I thought they would be just as excited as I was, right? Like, look at this awesome tool. Look at what we can do with it. And I think I know that it created resentment from others because I wasn't bringing them along in the right way. And I think, those experiences gave me a healthy dose of humility, which was necessary, and allowed me to understand how to build relationships with other teachers a little bit better. And that's a lesson that I wish I would have learned earlier. Yeah.
I feel lucky in the fact I feel like coaching taught me the importance of relationships. And if I wasn't a coach, I probably would have learned that lesson, but I think it would have taken me some more time. And so knowing how important it was to have a relationship with my athletes to help them perform at their best level above what they thought they could perform at, helped me transfer that to the classroom. Oh, wow, wait a minute. I can do the same thing with the students in my classroom. So yeah, I think that's important.
I can totally relate to that. Yep.
I just feel so challenged. Like I love your posts because they challenge me to open my doors to my classroom a little bit more. That's what I really appreciate about you, and I admire about you. And an educator, I feel like, okay, this is what he's doing today. My steps to go open my doors and try to get out there and be more global. I do appreciate that.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, that's a high compliment.
I do appreciate that. And kind of one of my final questions is, as I said, in Kansas, we're going through this redesign process, and schools are really thinking about if we could kind of bulldoze our school and start all over, what kind of changes would we make? So I think that's my question for you is if you could bulldoze your school and start completely over, what's like the one change, the one thing that you would want to do differently for your kids?
Yeah, so that's a big question. There's a lot of things that I would do. So, one of the first things I would do is have a big bonfire and burn all of our textbooks. I don't think there's a good program right? So if you are a school and you're looking to improve your reading, your kids' understanding of reading or mathematics or whatever, there is no program that is going to make you do it. Because at the end of the day, it is the quality of your teachers and the quality of the relationships they're building with kids, their content knowledge, and all of that is what makes a difference. And whether your students are having their basic needs met, right? Like those are the things that are going to make a difference for your students. So spend that money on helping your teachers become better teachers. Use that money to get a couple extra teachers so that you can give teachers more planning time together where they can collaborate. Use that money to give them teacher experiences, right? Have them experience what great learning looks like so that they can do it for their students. But spend that money on developing your teacher staff instead of buying textbooks. The other thing that I would do is substantially change how we assess students. Assessment is necessary. Feedback is necessary for learning. Grades are damaging. Grades are only good for adults, right? Grades do not help students learn. Feedback helps students learn, but a 90 on top of a paper does not help a kid learn. Telling a kid that you are a 3.42 on your GPA does not help a kid learn. All it does is rank and sort them. And kids are more than numbers. So we have got to change our education systems where we are actually giving kids feedback rather than giving them grades. And we know that this works because if you open any history book, the majority of the people in that history book never got graded on anything, regardless of how you feel about any historical figure. George Washington never received a grade in his life, but he received plenty of feedback, and that's what drove him. But grading was invented in the late 1800s, early 1900s, in order for teachers to be able to handle more students at once. So it took away the necessity of them having relationships with kids, and gave them more kids. And this was a way for them to, the word grade, that term comes from industry. It comes from factory models where you were grading the widgets that you were producing in that factory. We're now doing that to kids, and we need to take a step back and say, we need to develop relationships with kids instead of just reducing them to a number.
That's awesome.
Which is all the Kansas redesign. Let's break that factory model.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, that's perfect. Well, Michael, I just want to thank you so much for your time and for sharing with us. Super impactful interview. So I appreciate the tidbits that you were able to share with us and our viewers. And again, just like Jennifer said, I too am super inspired by following you and seeing what you're doing on social media. And so know that you're having a big impact on teachers and in education.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for having me. And the two of you are rock stars in your own right. I'm happy to know you and be connected with you because you make me better. So
I feel like we're long lost friends. Like I feel there's always a teacher kinship when you talk each other on social media.
Yep, no doubt.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much, and we'll be back for episode 5 soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye, guys.